This video will contain spoilers for Chapter 6. Hopefully you're not clicking on the video if you don't already have the class, though. Do you enjoy using broken and powerful support characters? Then Troubadour may be a class for you. Now, Troubadour is the #1 class in my heart for being granted to you by MIYABI, who is awesome, and it's also most likely the second best healer in the game and synergizes extremely well with the first, which is of course Signifer. Troubadour focuses on allowing the rest of the party to use arts as much as possible, while also having extremely spammable and fast recharge itself that can be exemplified further, and also has the most broken talent art in the game. In this video, I want to discuss the Troubadour class, talk about its strengths and weaknesses, and showcase how to use it most effectively. Let's get into it. So, Mio is the S rank for Troubadour, and as such, I will be using Troubadour on Mio in this video. I also finally get to use Longhair Mio, which is awesome because Longhair Mio is best Mio. To be honest, because of the way this class works, there's not really any specifically better option with the class. Like, healing power doesn't actually matter too much with the class because it's focused mainly on art recharge, and there isn't any character that has a really specific advantage there. Although I will say Mio being the partner of Noah is probably the best choice for the class anyway, just because of how the talent art for the class works, and some of Noah's unique properties that you also get in Chapter 6, so that makes it a pretty good fit. The arts that this class has include Autumn Rain, which is a regenerate buff that will apply to everyone in a circle around the user. This, of course, just restores health over time. It's not really the largest effect, but it's actually the only base healing art the class has, but that doesn't actually make the class much worse. Regardless, I don't actually like running it that much because I don't really find it that necessary, and I think the other skills that the class has are going to be better in most situations. Way Home is your burst art. This has a 400% power multiplier, which doesn't really matter because the attack stat of this class is terrible. But at the same time, having Burst as a reaction is really nice. This is the only Agnes class that gets access to Burst. So because of that, you can actually be the only Agnes class that's able to daze and burst at the same time. Burst is always a great tool for defensive utility, which synergizes pretty well with Troubadour, so I think this is a pretty good art, and worth running if you want to run any daze setups, but if you're not planning to do that, then you can probably replace this art with something else. Ring of Roses is basically required. This is a really fast recharge of 3. It's a filled effect, which means it charges up your talent art, and it's also really useful because it grants fast recharge, which not only applies to your allies, but applies to you as well, so you get all of your arts backups even sooner to spam them even more. I like this art a lot. It's one of the best arts in the entire game just for the effect it has, and if your allies are properly taking advantage of it, you can get a lot of arts out really quickly, which means more damage, which means more support effects, which means more tanking, which means everything. More combos, anything you want. Art recharge is always going to be really strong in all of these games, and as such, that makes this a really good skill. Twin Moons is an ether attack with a 310% damage multiplier. That part doesn't matter too much, but what does matter is the 100% chance to remove all buffs from target upon landing a hit. This affects every single buff in the entire game, including the invincibility buff that a couple enemies do have access to. If you use this art on them, they will lose that effect immediately, meaning you can start damaging them again immediately. This is a very useful effect and one of the best supportive abilities and arts in the entire game, especially against certain enemies that have really strong buff effects that could be really dangerous in fights. I recommend running this in most situations just because of how useful it is, unless an enemy just has no buff effects at all. Shadow Parade is a stance art that affects yourself and boosts your own art recharge by another additional 25%, but it will increase your damage taken by 25%. Now, getting aggro with this class is extremely difficult, so you shouldn't really have to worry about that too often. And honestly, dying with this class is actually not bad because of one of the skills of the class, and having additional recharge speed is always nice. Now, the cooldown is 9, which isn't the greatest, and honestly, there are a lot of ways to get recharge, so this may not be the most necessary, but still, having more recharge can never really hurt, so you can definitely run this if you want to, and it can always be a pretty useful effect. The talent art for this class is the most broken talent art in the entire game. Now, you can give this talent art to other classes and they can also take really good advantage of it. Signifer is another example that takes really good advantage of it. But basically, Glittering Melody here is an effect that not only instantly recharges all arts at 100%, which is already broken enough, because every time you use this, all of your allies are going to get all of their arts back instantly, and they can instantly use all of their really long cooldown arts that might be really powerful. They can instantly use combos again, instantly do everything. So that already makes this a really strong effect, but the other thing that is really strong is the pause buff timer buff that it applies. Basically what this does is pause all buff effects on all allies. Now this doesn't affect usage-based buffs like power charge or decoy, but every buff that is like attack up, evasion up, stuff like that, will be extended indefinitely until this runs out. The good thing about this, though, is that you can reapply the pause buff timer buff before it runs out. basically allowing you to infinitely extend all buff durations, and that makes this one of the best skills in the entire game. Not to mention, if you set yourself up right to be able to spam arts and get your talent art up faster, you're also recharging all of the arts for all of your allies even faster as well. This is an absolutely incredible talent art, with the only real weakness being the recharge gauge of 9, but even then, that's really easy to overcome, and that makes this class really broken. I'll be able to show off a couple applications for that later. Now I'm just going to show my master skills. Multi-Blast is basically the only healing art I have on this kit, just to give myself some healing so it's not completely useless as an effect. And also because there aren't the best master art options for Agnes-based healers, since there's only 2 Kevis-based healer classes. So this is probably one of the only really good options you have access to anyway. Speaking of which, Myopic String gives you access to a Daze. This combos really well with Burst. As long as you have other characters able to break and topple, you're able to Daze and Burst by yourself, which is pretty valuable and one of the main benefits of this class. Advanced Cooldown is a second field effect art. I'm obviously using the skill that lets me set one more field effect, and this is really useful just because it's honestly something that'll recharge your talent gauge more, and your talent art is really broken, and that's one of the main reasons to use this. Defense Up can also be a pretty nice effect, but it's not going to be as good as Ring of Roses in most situations. The skills of the class include End Song. This will recharge all allies' arts by 100% when incapacitated. So if you somehow manage to get aggro or you die from a straight AoE, there is still benefit because your allies will get all of their arts back instantly. As long as you have another healer to revive you, this doesn't actually put you in a terrible spot unless you are really close to having your talent art back and then just immediately die and lose it. So that can be a little unfortunate, but at the same time, this is not a bad effect, and honestly, it can be very useful to have all of your allies able to get all their arts back in case you're in a really bad situation in a fight, and just need that extra burst damage to maybe finish things off. So I think this is a pretty good skill, even if it's something that only really activates upon dying. Dance of Barrages gives you a 12% chance to keep recharge when using an art. So basically, every time you use an art, you have a 12% chance you can just use it immediately again afterwards, or save it again for later. This is a really nice effect. It is RNG, but at the same time, it's still pretty useful to have just because you can get a lot of benefit out of this if it activates pretty often. And 12% is probably a bit more than you probably think it is, especially when combined with a certain accessory that I'll be using as well. Allowing you to spam arts even more, get your talent gauge up even more, and just do even more arts, because why not? Dance of Life will give you 100% recharge on your own arts whenever any ally is incapacitated. Kind of the reverse of the other skill. This is really nice because this means anytime an ally dies, you instantly have all of your arts again, which can put you in a decent situation regardless. And since you don't actually have to revive them to get this effect, like one of the accessory effects, you can let your other healer revive the ally and just kind of focus on giving your other party members more recharge or more bonus effects or more buffs. And that makes this a pretty good effect to have. I think it's one of the best possible skills for a healer, and honestly one of the best possible skills in general. It's unfortunate it's not a master skill, but at the same time, really, really good skill. I really like it a lot. And Swift Song is a really good party support effect. Gives all allies accuracy and evasion 20%. It doesn't stack. It is a master skill, so other classes can run this, but you do not need to run this if you have the Troubadour, because they'll automatically get this effect, and no other class has to waste any of their master skill slots to have this effect, and it's always going to be worth running because accuracy and evasion is really, really important in this game. There is really no negative to having extra accuracy and evasion, so this is a great skill. For my master skills, I have All About Support. As mentioned earlier, this allows me to run one extra field art, which helps you charge my talent gauge faster. That's where Advanced Cooldown comes from. Eternal Formation will extend field effect duration by 50%. Honestly, this isn't actually the most useful just because of how fast you can use arts. You can kind of easily get all of your field effects up at once no matter what. So this doesn't end up being the most impactful in a lot of situations, but it can be nice in case you die or are unable to use arts for some reason or in a chain attack. But at the same time, another really good skill you might consider here instead is Capable Hands to instantly start out with your talent art, which can be really useful at the start of battle to get a lot of burst damage on an enemy, or take advantage of some unique bonus mechanics, and honestly I like running that a lot too, so that's a pretty good skill as well. Protector's Pride will boost recharge speed by 50% when non-defenders are targeted. Now because of how this class works with all the weird recharge effects, I honestly think running as low on defenders as possible actually makes this class even better, and considering this also increases your recharge speed even further, you can get a ton of benefit out of this master skill, and I like this skill a lot with the party setup I am currently running. For my gem setup, I have Life-Saving Expertise, which will boost speed of ally revival by 45%. Always a useful skill to get characters up faster, especially in a kind of dangerous party composition without many defenders outside of Asher, who's really only here for chain attacks. Soothing Breath allows you to revive allies with a lot more health, and get them a much bigger buffer upon their return to the combat. And Refined Blessing extends duration of buff effects issued by self by 50%. Now, since you can freeze buffs, you might be wondering why we have this. Well, the extend duration is more for the pause buff effect than anything. Since that counts as a buff, you can extend the duration of that, giving yourself more time to get Glittering Melody back up again, and extend the duration of every other buff effect. Now, increasing power does not actually do anything for this because it's just a stasis effect, so there's really nothing else that can come from that. Double Strike and Steady Striker could be some options to consider for even more recharge, but I don't really think it's very necessary with this class. I find myself hardly ever auto-attacking with this class once it gets going, just because of how fast you can get all of your arts back. For my accessories, I am running a Brute Memory. This is a pretty good effect just to allow yourself to have some extra survivability in combat. I've also ran Solace Rings here to give myself a little bit of extra healing on my one healing art I have, just because that does come in clutch, and since you have really fast cooldown, you can use that healing art pretty often to heal everyone, even if you're not primarily focused on that task. Knock-on Strap gives you a 10% chance to keep recharge when using art. This is the same effect as the skill you have, except it adds an additional 10%, giving you about a 22% chance to keep an art every time you use it. This applies to fusion arts as well, and can be really, really beneficial in just allowing you to spam arts as much as possible. And every time you get a cooldown on an art, you can use that art again, which recharges your other Agnes arts even further, allowing you to use those arts, which recharges your arts again, and it can just be a really, really infinite cycle if you're lucky enough, and it's really, really broken. Fraternal Badge boosts recharge speed by 50%. It's also worth noting that all of these cancel effects are also boosted by these recharge speed increases and by your Ring of Roses field effect. So basically every one of these recharge speed effects just stacked with each other really, really efficiently, allowing you to use arts even more. So this allows you to charge up your talent gauge faster, freeze all buffs, allows you to boost everyone's recharge even faster, allows you to heal more, allows you to do basically everything you would possibly want to do with this class. I think this is one of the best setups you can possibly run with this class, and despite not having any defenders, it can still be used to just kind of crush enemies even on hard mode, and I want to show that off now. So let's take a look at how to use this class practically with all that done. So I'm going to fight my favorite dragon friend on hard mode. I feel like this would be a good way to show up how you can remove buffs, because this thing likes to make itself invincible pretty often, and we can kind of easily bypass that with this class. Now, I did use some Troubadour stuff before starting the fight, just because that's always going to be really beneficial, especially since you can use the Glittering Melody to pause buffs. Sorry, I mean Signifer stuff. And now I have pause buff timer, and it's already ready to go. This is really good because Noah's activated Awakening since I have him on the Seraph class, so he's going to get a lot of benefit out of the pause buff timer, since that's not a buff that Signifer can normally pull. And since Troubadour can extend all buffs, it works really well with the Signifer class that can just kind of just start stacking basically every buff in the game that's not duration-based, or that's not usage-based, but it can stack all the duration-based buffs basically really easily. So now, at this point, we're in a really good situation. Noah just activated his invincibility from Lucky 7, and since the stasis was already applied, this basically makes Noah completely invincible now, which is really interesting because if you're using Mio, you can actually pass buffs between the two by using Interlink, and that now makes Mio invincible. So this is, I've shown the strategy off in previous videos somewhat, but like a more broken instant setup of it. This is just kind of like playing naturally and still being able to use this effect because of how broken Stasis is. Like, I didn't necessarily like plan to do this. When I did this, I was like, oh, hey, I can actually do this. And it's not necessarily required at all. You can definitely still kind of annihilate without this, but it's definitely something you can do. As you can see by how much I'm using arts, it's really, really easy to charge up Glittering Melody. Really, really easy to just use a bunch of different effects here. Like, this is hard mode, so your talent gauge recharges even reduced some, and I'm still able to get Glittering Melody up extremely easily. Now, everyone besides Mio and Noah are not invincible, since I don't have any way to pass the buff since I'm not playing Signifer. But at the very least, I'm still able to easily keep them alive with my one heal, able to easily get their recharge down really fast. And with all the Glittering Melodies I'm spamming, they're able to use arts even more often, which makes this fight go really, really quickly despite being a hard mode fight, which is pretty nice, honestly. Now, you can also see that Knock-on Strap and ability to get my arts back like 22% of the time is really coming in clutch a lot too for just allowing myself to do even more. Now, you can also burst away the Enrage, which I'm going to try to show off here as well once I can actually get another break. Because I have Myopic Strain and Way Home, obviously. And despite the Way Home having a cooldown recharge of 8, it charges up in 3 art usages, which is pretty insane because of how much recharge we have with Ring of Roses and our other effects when a tank is not being targeted. There's a break, there's a topple, I'm going to use my Daze Art, and then I'm going to use the Burst Art. So Burst gets rid of Enrage, not that we really needed to, but it's still a thing. I'm still extending all these buffs. Noah's probably hitting really hard since he's never lost Awakening, and Awakening is pretty broken as an effect. So this ends up being a really, really good setup because of that. Now, Signifer and Troubadour, if they do have one weakness as a team setup, they kind of are low on healing compared to other classes. Your main source of healing is just going to be Troubadour's multi-blast spam, just because of how fast you can recharge your arts. So that is something to keep in mind. If you get off on the wrong foot, fights are going to be more difficult at the start of fights, but if you can get to a good situation early, like maybe using Signifer arts before the fight actually starts to get some buffs before fights start, then that can be really useful. So here's just an example of how you can really take advantage of Glittering Melody in capable hands, like especially if you're partnered with Noah. Noah there was able to survive with 1 HP, get its Awakening with Seraph again, and also activate Invincibility, and I also was able to go to Ouroboros and do the exact same thing again. And we're fighting level 200 enemy now, and it's just going to be basically the same thing from here. So, despite everyone except like 3 people being dead, it doesn't really matter. Despite Mio having 1 HP, she's completely fine, because she's not going to be able to take any more damage. I'll be living with 1 HP for a really long time after this, which is really funny. And from here, we're just going to kind of wait on Tyon once he gets revived. I actually have to go revive him myself. I kind of remember a little bit late, but I wanted to use Glittering Melody first. So Tyon's going to give us more buffs. We can't actually get more buffs until Tyon's active, since I'm not a Signifer. But once Tyon's up again, we'll be able to get those and start extending more buffs for the rest of our party, so they can be more useful in this fight and not get one-shot constantly. Mio living with 1 HP is really funny. If there were any setups that like dealt more damage based on how much remaining health you have, there could be some really funny setups with this as well. Alright, the fight just kind of goes like this for a while though, so I'm going to fast forward to the chain attack, or skip ahead. Don't want this video to go on too long, but I want to just make note of if you use Stasis right before using a chain attack, you can kind of get your buffs for a lot of the chain attack duration. Not the entire duration, but for a lot of it. So any attack buffs you might have, any critical damage up or critical hit bonuses, you can extend those right before the chain attack, and for the first 3 rounds or so, you'll have access to those, which can be really useful. Now, I'm going to speed up the video from here because I don't want this video to go on too long. And as you might expect, it's not too much different from here. We're just kind of taking advantage of a couple really strong chain attack mechanics, and Mio doesn't actually do too much here, so it's not really the most entertaining from this point on. Troubadour is just kind of the setup before the chain attack, but you're able to see just how long these buffs last, which is really nice. Like, this is the 3rd round, they're still active, and we get another smash in. I probably should have saved it for Uni to use it in a later round, but at the same time, it ended up being fine. The pause buff duration just ran out, so we are now without all of those extra buffs we had earlier. That's a little bit unfortunate, but at the same time, not really a huge deal. Still able to kill this enemy just fine. I could have done even more or killed faster if I would have saved the smash with Uni, because I think Noah's Lucky 7 smash is a little bit weirdly programmed there to not do as much damage because you're not you don't have like an actual art to stack it with to do a bunch of extra damage. But at the same time, still a really good effect. Smashes are always good in chain attacks to get a bunch of extra damage. And this round is pretty easy to end it on. I'm going to get some extra damage out of Mio there. And she does a decent chunk. We kind of just, and then we end it with the Ouroboros form. Not too difficult at all. Now, as a final note, you may be wondering, well, what if I don't want to take advantage of invincibility? Well, it's definitely not required. You could definitely see in this video it's not required at all. In this kind of setup, how I'm basically functioning is that when someone dies, it recharges my arts. I'm able to use arts to help the rest of the team. And if I die, everyone else's arts gets recharged. And with the fast revival speed I have, it ends up being kind of beneficial sometimes anyway. The soul hacker I have is running Underworld Rage, so it gets a damage boost when someone dies anyway. So death actually ends up being kind of optimal somehow, which is really funny to think about, because in previous games that would have been garbage. But the game is kind of just works like that, and you can easily beat a lot of enemies with this setup. There shouldn't be too many issues if you're running a good Troubadour setup. I think this class is really strong, one of the best healers in the game, and yeah, MIYABI's awesome. I think that's going to cover it for this video. I don't really have much else to say, so I hope you guys learned something from watching this. And if you did, please be sure to subscribe, like, comment, and do whatever else you want to support me, and I will appreciate it. And with all that said, thank you guys so much for watching, and have a wonderful and blessed day.